From recruiting and consulting firm Riderflex, I'm your host, Steve Urban, and here is your Riderflex episode of the day. And on today's episode of the Riderflex podcast, we have guest Shaun MacGillivray. He's the producer and president of McGillivray Freeman Films, a privately owned production, distribution, and marketing company that creates IMAX films, educational outreach, and programming for IMAX theaters around the world. They've created 5 of the top 10 highest grossing IMAX films, including Everest, To Fly, and The Living Sea. Shaun MacGillivray on the Riderflex podcast. Very cool to have you on the show, Shaun. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great story. I did a bunch of homework on you and your dad and the company and the films. Really cool stuff, man. You're the first real live Hollywood person we've had on the show, so that's pretty cool.
I wouldn't call myself Hollywood, but all good. Yeah.
I mean, hey, if you get to talk to Springsteen about putting music on one of your films, then I'm a fan, right? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, he's amazing. That was pretty amazing. We were able to do that.
Will you tell the listeners a little about yourself for those that don't know you personally? Some family, early life stuff, where you grew up, things like that before we get into the company, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, totally, Steve. So, I grew up lucky enough to go all over the world. My dad, so much of my family life and my business life are intermixed. My dad started the company making circles back in the late 60s, early 70s. Those did well enough where he was like, oh my gosh, I can do this for a living. He then went to Hollywood, worked the lights as Stanley Kubrick, did the opening of The Shining, where the car goes up to the Crazy Hotel, and then got tapped by the Smithsonian to make their first IMAX film called To Fly. That was in 1976. There was only 4 IMAX theaters in existence. Now there's over 1,000. We've done 40 IMAX films ever since. But for me, 76, I wasn't born yet. So, back in the 80s, I was lucky enough. I got to go on location all over the world with my parents, cheap extra in a lot of these movies. You'd see the little blonde haired kid kind of running around in the background, and then you keep on seeing him. And same with my sister, who's 3 years younger. And so, I caught the filmmaking bug early and was like, whoa, my dad has a really cool job.
Right.
If I can figure out how to make this so that it becomes a sustainable business, this would be incredible. And so I went from, grew up in Laguna Beach, went from there to Emory University, Atlanta, Georgia, did a economics business degree, and then went to, right after that, to USC for film school. And film school, USC is incredible. It's one of the best film schools in the country. Amazing professors, incredible talent around you. The people that you're working with are just so smart. But it's interesting because it's the first thing they say when you get in is they go, congratulations, you made it. It's one of the top schools in the country. We know every single one of you wants to be a big time director, and probably none of you will become a big time director. You're like, okay, pop that bubble.
Great.
Yeah.
But you're telling you, did they know who you were? Did any of the professors know your dad? Were they like, oh, well, this guy, Shaun, he's already been trained. He's already been educated on this stuff.
Yeah. So most of them knew my dad to some extent, but okay. A lot of the people are not just, there's a few documentarians that are there, and then a lot of narrative. And so it's, they look at it like, they're going to teach you how best to tell stories that inspire and provide incredible emotion. And that's fantastic. That is what I learned, and I learned that from my dad as well. Incredible program. Having said that, it's I don't think you have to go to film school to do this as a living. And I learned the majority of business as it relates to film outside of it. Like
I would
yeah.
think so. Were you working for your dad through school? I'm guessing you did. You worked your way through school as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was working with my dad on I did a lot of our what we call now like behind the scenes pieces. Like I'd be that that again. I mean, I was back when I was young, pretty scrawny kid. Well, I'd be that scrawny kid with the camera, like getting in people's faces, trying to make some cool behind the scenes stories. Because a lot of times, I mean, sometimes it's even more interesting hearing how we made the film than the actual film, just because there
Yes.
can be so many crazy stories around, okay, how difficult it was to get that shot, what was it like when we were with the polar bear and the polar bear's two cubs in on this giant icebreaker, and
Were
at
you
any
free? And were you
second,
freezing?
and
Were you freezing to death?
you're totally freezing. You're if you get too close to the polar bear, I mean, the whole polar bear can obviously eat you.
Right.
And so you don't talk about the filmmaking stuff when you're actually in the film, unless you can interweave that somehow into the film, and a lot of times we don't do that. So
I'm always wondering that.
we have some cool stories.
Yeah. I always think about those things. I'm like, well, aren't those bugs driving him crazy, flying in his face? Like, how's that cameraman concentrating? Or is there a guy with a rifle that's like aimed at the polar bear just in case they charge? I'm always thinking about those little things like that. Or is there like an automobile running 100 yards behind them with the heater on, and they run over there and warm up and then come back?
There's always something, even though like we have a lot less, I'd say, movie magic than what's in Hollywood. But for our film National Parks Adventure, which it sounds like you just saw last night, we filmed these frozen waterfalls on in Pictured Rock National Lakeshore in Upper Michigan, and
Saw that.
incredible. It was so cold while we were doing it. We had this big IMAX camera with film in it. It doesn't like the cold, and so what we would do is we'd film, and then we'd put a big tent on top of the camera, and we'd have a heater inside so that the camera was like toasty and warm while all of us were freezing on the outside. And I mean, there's always little stories like that.
I saw the lady, the actress. I can't remember her name in the film, but there was at one point where she was trying to climb up that ice hill, and she's like, I can't. My fingers are pretty much frozen. Like, I have to come down.
Yeah, that was Rachel Pohl, who I absolutely love. She's amazing. And yeah, I mean, that was a scene where she hadn't done that many expeditions around ice climbing, and it was below, it was like probably maybe negative 10 or so. This was Fahrenheit, so I mean, we're talking cold. And she's up there with hardly any type of clothing, because she's climbing, and you get hot very fast. But then you have to wait for us, because we got to get our shot like all ready to go. And so she's up there in her fingers, and she's like, okay, I got to come down. And so she came down, and it was one of those where you're like, I can't believe you're even able to do what you did, Rachel. Like I mean, it's incredible what you're able to do. She's a fantastic human being.
What's the scariest moment you've been in? Like, I mean, personally, have you and your dad, or has somebody on the film crew almost been attacked by an animal, or almost fallen off a cliff, or anything super crazy you want to share?
I mean, so my dad's got a lot more stories than I do. Like he's got somewhere, he did a film, I was there for it too, called The Living Sea, and he was flying all over Palau. And Palau, if you haven't heard of it, it's incredible. Like these small green islands amongst this like blue azure, just incredible ocean, and you can actually see the reefs underneath because it's so clear, the water. And he was flying in this plane, and they were filming, and so he's doing more of looking off to the side because he was filming in another plane, and the the pilot started looking off the side with my dad instead of looking in front. And he looked up, my dad looked up, luckily, and saw that all what he could see through the cockpit was just straight up green, meaning they were going directly into the trees. And I mean, they would have immediately died. And he yelled to the pilot, who was actually still looking back at the other plane, trying to, stay together, and immediately pulled up, and they clipped a few of the trees. And so that's probably his most scary time, even though he's had others. Like, you have to be incredibly careful, and there's a certain amount of risk with everything that you do as far as filmmaking. But I'd say that was a total fluke, and it's one of those where when we go out and shoot, you take as many precautions as you can. We're probably the most risk adverse of a lot of these other companies that are out there, because you just got to be so careful, especially when you're doing any type of adventure filmmaking.
What year did your dad and his partner start it? 67, 61? What year was it? Founded the company?
Yeah, so I mean, to that point, like, my dad started making those surf films back in the late 60s, early 70s. I mean, he started doing it while I was in high school. But his first film, To Fly, for the Smithsonian, it's actually still playing the Smithsonian today. And it's really held the test of time. He did that with his partner, Jim Freeman, and Jim never got to see the film because he passed away in a helicopter crash like a week before the premiere.
That's so
yeah,
sad.
It was really sad. And that was my dad's best friend, partner. They were on this big time trajectory, and it was incredible. Like, I wasn't born yet, but it was incredibly difficult for my dad. But we've kept, my dad owns the company, but we've kept the name in honor of his legacy. But also goes to show, just there are risks. There's risks associated with all types of work, but I'd say a little bit more with the stuff, with certain of the stuff that we do. Whenever it involves helicopters and planes, there's obviously going to be a little risk.
I had this vision in my head when I was watching some of the old clips. My vision was your dad and Jim, right? Was Jim Freeman?
Yeah, Jim Freeman.
Your dad and Jim, like, hey man, let's film these surfers, and then let's go back to the beach hut and have some drinks and get stoned and watch it all together and like give each other high fives, and it'll be cool. And then later on, they're like, wow, a lot of people are watching this. I wonder if we could sell this shit somehow. That's a
I mean, a lot ago, I wish I got to be a fly on the wall back then.
Right.
I mean, just think like the 60s, 70s, being in California at the beach, the counterculture movement. I mean, this was before people were wearing board shorts across the country. There wasn't the Quicksilvers of today. They were the renegades, and being able, he would shoot the film, and then he'd do the guerrilla marketing of basically renting out an auditorium, and that might be, a church, it might be a school, whatever. And then he's got to market it. And so he would post all these, pamphlet signs up across the city. And he would just crush it. I mean, there'd be lines out the door. Everybody would be watching the film. They come in. It was a lot of these guys were just hippies that were like, learning how to surf too. And what was funny too is he would show the film, but he'd be actually narrating it in real time.
That's so good.
Awesome.
That's so awesome.
And he had to actually train himself, because he used to have a higher voice. He had to train himself in the mirror to have a lower voice because it sounded too high at first. And now he's actually got a very low voice.
And his girlfriend or wife, it was your mom.
Well, that was my mom, man.
Was that his girlfriend or wife at the time? Wasn't she doing tickets at the front door? So she's selling the tickets and he's like narrating in the audience. That's pretty good.
You got the story. Yeah. Yeah. So my mom and dad were sweethearts in high school, and
Cool.
both grew up together. They went to the same high school. And so, yeah, she would be at the ticket counter, and, she would be getting all the dough, getting all the money. And, they end up, they were really together, and there was a tiny bit of a break in college. She went to Cornell. My dad stayed and went to UC Santa Barbara.
Okay.
But they married at 35, and they've been together since pretty much since high school. So yeah,
I
it's
can only, I
and
can
they're
only
still
imagine.
going strong, and they're still going strong, and my dad's still incredibly involved,
Awesome.
very creative, so fun to work with. He's he's just an honor. It's just awesome to be able to
Well,
work with him.
that's nice of you to say, but I do have to ask you, just working with family in general, and I've been
Mhm.
around it, I've seen it. I mean, I've heard lots of stories. I mean, your mom's involved, right? Your sister still works for the company too, I think, right? And so,
Yep.
I know there's got to be a few bumps in there where you're like, damn, I wish I wasn't working for my dad today.
So absolutely, it's a family company.
Yeah.
My dad, my mom, my sister, um, come in all the time. We're 30 people, 30 creatives here in Laguna Beach. But it's interesting, and I I'm part of YPO, so like a lot. I don't know. Have you heard of
Yep.
YPO?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So like there, as part of that organization, there's a lot of family companies as well. I think what sets us apart and why we are so well together is, my dad is incredibly open and pragmatic
Okay.
to new ideas, and to also just how knowing, like, okay, here's our goal, this is what we're out to do, and we just got to figure out how to get there. And he's been that way throughout, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those where it's been um it's worked very well, and it's worked very well with with working with my sister and my mom too. Um we all kind of, the idea of respecting one another, and opinions and all that fun stuff. So there, as with any family company, there can be a little bit of difference of opinions, and when it comes to creative, it's interesting. Like, I think what I've brought to the table as it relates to, when we're doing these big film shoots, is obviously a generational difference as far as taste. I'm typically pushing for different music than my dad. I'm like, you can only use Moody Blues so many times, Dad. But and so we've gotten some, like, I mean, there's certain talent, and I love all different types of music, and there's certain talent that is just transcendent. Like, you get Bruce Springsteen, completely transcendent. And I also like, you look in Parks Adventure. I love that soundtrack, and we have the Lumineers, we got Brandy Carlisle, we've got some incredible songs and talent from all over, and such an important part of what we do, is the music, along with, obviously, you've got to have breathtaking visuals and a great storyline. And what I typically say, because I do a lot of talks around, like, well, how do you create great stories? It's when it comes to music, and this is for everybody. Like, if you're marketing your company on, just by using your iPhone, if you've done a sequence or a 30-second spot or whatever, and the music, if you feel it and it hits you right here, it's good. But if it doesn't, go try and find some other music.
Totally
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, you guys do such a great job with the music stuff, and I'm all about that too. The music is what stirs the emotion for me when I'm watching stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely critical. Will you do this? Can you give like a McGillivray overview real quick for just like a 2-minute, like, tell us about the company as it stands today, a nice overview,
Yep.
and you know, and then maybe talk about recent films or anything that's about to release.
Sure. So the company is McGillivray Freeman Films. We're probably best known for producing and distributing IMAX giant screen documentaries, but we're visual storytellers. We do everything from iPhone to IMAX. We create commercials, we create short form content, long form content, typically all in the documentary storytelling, whether it's documentary storytelling for inspiring people to care about a product, care about a place, whether it's telling a fantastic story about space, about the oceans, about really anything. That's what we pride ourselves on, is that quality, is that emotional, inspirational storytelling. And we have incredible partners. We've got museums and science centers and aquariums all over the world that work with us, that show our films, that we then go out and we do a lot of educational outreach, where we partner with the museums and science centers. They reach out to the teachers, have field school trips, come to these museums and science centers. We create a package where you watch the film and then you learn more about the topic around that in that one day, for those teachers. And you know, when you think about it, like right now, you know, there are certain places where museums and science centers open, certain places that aren't, but we have these incredible packages like virtual field school trips that are ready for teachers, and I'd say educators of all walks of life. Like we've all become an educator now if you have kids. And you know, whether that's our film Dream Big, which is all about inspiring the next generation of engineers, whether that's our film National Parks Adventure, which is all about reconnecting to the natural world, learning about how important these places are to continue to protect them, and learning about our national park system and how that was created. And at the same time, learning about geology and all that stuff. We put, like, you can watch the film, but then you can learn all these various concepts that are actually core to K through 12.
How do the topics, you know, one of my first questions, my wife said last night, we were, you know, studying for the podcast, and she said, well, how do they pick the topics? How do they pick the subjects? And so how you go for it? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, you know, there's certain passion projects where we just know we want to make, and then I've got to go out and find the funding for them. And then there's other projects where, you know, there's either a partner comes to us, like we did for Dream Big. We partnered with the American Society of Civil Engineers, and you know, they came to us and they said, look, we need help. We need more women and more diversity in all these engineering firms across the country. There's way too many old white dudes that are, you know, heads of the boards, chairman of these companies, and so we need to inspire the youth, especially women and minorities, and we need to make engineering so that it seems sexy. Right now, it seems like a good job, but it doesn't seem sexy. Kids are more into technology. We need to make, and so we said we've got an amazing platform for that. You know, we've got partnerships with these museums and science centers. We got distribution. It then goes to Netflix afterwards, and we can have fantastic characters that are women, that are diverse, that then girls look up to and say, hey, I want to be that when I grow up. And we were with that film, it's still playing in theaters. It's playing on Netflix right now. We had a variety of different ways that we got moms and daughters to come in. We'd have mother-daughter nights, where we'd have women engineers that were at the museums and science centers, so that after they watched the film, they could then do a Q&A with those women engineers.
Very good.
And all in all, it really, I mean, it was incredibly impactful. Millions of people have seen it, and 80% of kids that have watched it have said that they want to be engineers afterwards. Now, you know, whether they do that 10 years from now, who knows? But at least they got excited about it and started thinking about it more.
So sometimes
And so
sometimes go ahead.
yeah, I mean, what I'll say is like, in order for us to do these movies, in order for us to do really any project, we need to go and find funding. Like that's how our business works. And so
Okay.
it's finding corporate partners, it's finding associations, it's finding foundations, it's finding tourism boards, destination marketing organizations, sustainable investors that are looking at inspiring or educating the public in some way. And and you know, so for us, it's really about finding those partners that have those values and those goals. And a lot of times it's getting that partner. For Dream Big, it was ASCE and also Bechtel Corporation, who really put up the funding to make the film and educational outreach happen. And they did it because they wanted to inspire the next generation of engineers. And I think we were able to do that, and it's continuing to do that.
So if I'm watching a Tom Hanks film, somebody, whoever owned the screenplay or whatever, they're getting a movie studio to back making the film, and they're paying for everything. But in your case, there's not some big giant studio in Hollywood that's paying for everything. So you're raising the cash either through sponsors that want the film made or people that want to donate. Is that, do I have that right?
Yeah, so we've worked with studios before. For our film To the Arctic, we had Warner Brothers put up the majority of the funding.
Okay.
But the majority of our projects are not studio driven. They're not Hollywood system driven. They are associations, foundations, corporate partners, sustainable investors, where we are both the production and the distribution company, working with our partners to whatever topic it is, educate them, inspire them, entertain them, get them excited about that topic, and potentially about that company as well.
Raising cash then for you is, what is that, 50% of your job, 75% of your job? How much of your, what percentage of your week is like, hey, is asking people to write checks?
So, I mean, the good thing is I love what I do. Like I really like, I'm one of those where I love going out and looking for partners and looking for funding. And I think the business side of it is really interesting to me. It'd be hard to have my job if I didn't find it exciting and interesting. So once we get a project, I mean, making the film's the cherry on top. I mean, that's like, okay, this is great. Like we're ready. And but yeah, a big part of my job is finding the partners to make these films a reality. And then I get to do the creative afterwards. And we've got a great team of creatives that help us meet that goal.
Have you ever, you're like, hey Dad, listen, I got the money. Yeah, let's go. Go ahead and send the crew. It's cool. Yeah, I gotta, they told me the money's coming. And then like 4 days later, he's on site and you're like, yeah, that check I told you was coming in.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those where the check's got to clear for you.
Right. Yeah.
It's not smart otherwise.
Right. What's the business? Is the business model, you guys are getting paid for your services, but you're not owners of the film. Whoever put up the money owns what's the model look like a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, each deal's different. Yes, we get paid as a production company to make the film, and then we get a percentage fee on distribution as well. And it's all over the board how the deal works as it relates to are we owners in the film outside of that? Is it a sponsorship versus an investment for a company? Are they non-equity or equity? All that stuff. In the end though, like for us, it's really about, we just want to have projects and be able to tell incredible stories. And so, we less so around how we get the funds, more so around making sure we have incredible partners that we like working with, and then also delivering on whatever we're looking to do, so that we know that the film will do well. Like, that's an important part of my job, is not only, you know, creating a great film, but also educating the client around what it can't be in order for it to succeed in this business. Like, I can't feel like a commercial. People are buying a ticket for it. Like, that's a big deal. You know, it's got to be something that is entertaining as well as just super cool and informative.
What's easier, a sponsor like Subaru paying for a film, or partnering with a big studio like Warner Brothers? What's easier?
I don't know. No, like I think each one, each partnership is, you know, very unique to the film, and very different. And you know, the partners that I like the most are the ones that do a film with us. It does incredibly well, and they go, "Hey, let's do another. Let's do another. Let's do another."
Okay.
And we've been fortunate to have a few like those, even with you know, the you know, these films are I'd say much less cost than Hollywood, but more than your typical documentary.
Have you ever gotten a phone call from a studio that says, "Hey, we want you to come be the production crew for, you know, a non-documentary film"? Like, "Hey, we're doing Die Hard 8. Come be the," you know, have you ever gotten one of those phone calls?
So you know, my dad, he started early on doing a lot of that. Like, when he went to when he worked with Kubrick on The Shining, that's what he did. Like, that was the exact deal that you just said. It was one where he played second. He played the second director on the project, doing all of the aerials, and you know, the iconic aerial that he did was the aerial of the car going up to the hotel, which you know, you got the creepy music going, and it's just incredible when he shot it. But he also he worked with John Milius on Big Wednesday, where he did all of the surfing footage. So he's done a variety, in our company's done a variety of work like that. I'd say that's not what keeps the door open, and when it comes to the company, that what keeps us going and growing is really, you know, it's about finding great clients, great partners, and telling fantastic stories. You know, whether that's short form content or longer form documentaries. And what's cool about it, as it relates to right now, and a trend that's been going on for the last 8 to 10 years, is that, you know, people want authentic documentary storytelling.
It's true.
And you're seeing it when it comes to Netflix. You're seeing it when it comes to streaming partners, docu-series, being able to tell stories that aren't just reality TV as it relates to unscripted. More and more people want it, and audiences are, you know, when you're at home, more and more people are streaming it. And so us being able to find it may not be a big Hollywood studio, but a Netflix, a Hulu, Amazon, a History Channel, a broadcaster, a Nat Geo Discovery, to say, hey, you know, that pitch that you presented to us, we want to do that. Let's do it. We have more opportunity than we ever have. That's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, the one I watched, the Natural Parks Adventure, was on Netflix last night. So that's what happens. It starts out on the big screen, it hits the educators and so forth, and then eventually it's going to flow to Netflix. Is that going to be your pattern for everything you launch?
That's our pattern when it comes to the films that are theatrical IMAX documentaries to start with. Okay. We also work directly with broadcasters and streaming partners where it's straight to them, where they are commissioning it, and you know, we make money off the production. And then there's also films where we go to a corporate partner and we say, look, this film is perfect for you. You put up the funding for it. and we've got amazing streaming partners that will then play it. And so
Okay.
that's another angle too, where it's not directly through the distribution model of IMAX theaters.
Is there anything you won't do? Any topics you like? Okay, these topics, like, we can't do anything on these subjects here. Have you been pushed? I'm sure you've said no to some things. Can you talk about that?
That's a great problem to have. Wow, man, I'd love to have more of that. No, I mean, what I'll say is we're a small company, so it's we can only take on a certain amount of work, and then we've got to expand. And so it's one of those where we also need to be selective as to who we work with. And when it comes to topics, I think there's a lot of ways to tell stories that may seem not super interesting, incredibly interesting. And it's probably, one of the reasons why we've been so successful is by being smart as far as characters, by being smart as far as, really looking for those gems, those kind of aha moments. You can make a topic that's, engineering, like on the face of it, engineering doesn't sound super sexy.
That's true.
We made it really, really sexy. And
I
cool.
was inspired. I have not watched that one, but I did watch the trailer, and the trailer was inspiring. Great job on the trailer. And so I need to watch that one. Let me ask you this. The company's been around for a long time now. You're running it. So I'm guessing you're running it, and Dad still kind of pokes his head in and says, well, I actually want it this way. I don't know what the relationship is, but anyway. Are there thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, my dad gets to do what he loves to do, which is he likes to be creative, and so and he's an incredible talent, and I'm so lucky that he gets to be creative on the things that he wants to be creative with.
I want to get you and your dad out for drinks and ask you some more questions around all that fun. At some point. Well, are there thoughts to ever sell the company, and have you taken on any investors, or does you and your dad still just own it outright? What do you want to share there, if anything?
Yeah, we own it outright. We own 100% of it. We obviously have investors as it relates to those partners and projects.
Right.
And I mean, when it comes to we are right now a service-oriented company. It's not like we have. Right. We do with our films as it relates to distribution, the annual recurring revenue, but a lot of our projects are project based, and so it's one of those where you gotta keep chugging along in order to have the funding coming in. So maybe at some point I'll be able to create something that is more, I'd say, more where it's just fantastic annual recurring revenue. To your
point, service businesses, they're hard to sell, really. For all the entrepreneurs and founders and folks listening. I mean, you can build a great lifestyle business for you and your family, for sure. But they are harder to sell at some point, right? It's true.
And there's a variety of ways to bridge that gap. I mean, one is if you can find, a strategic partner that needs your brand, wants your distribution in a way so it really makes sense. If you can create your own platform in some way, whether that's whether that's a website, whatever it is, where there's a ton of eyeballs, there's distribution there that is growing, the numbers are growing, it's going to be there over time. But if what you are selling is you and your dad, it's a lot harder to sell than something that's there that can be obviously completely run by somebody else. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of businesses that are out there that it's hard to make that jump. And I'd say when it comes to us, I'm always trying to grow the company because I think it's way more fun to be hiring people than firing people. And isn't that the truth? Yeah, especially right now. And so that, I mean, that's a big part of what I'm thinking about, and a big part of how I approach business. But at the same time, our company's built on quality, so it's making sure that whatever you do is incredible.
I can relate, my friend. Riderflex being a recruiting and consulting firm, I mean, similar model, right? It's a service business, and I can relate to everything that you just said. Very, very similar.
Yep.
What's coming up? Tell me what are you guys working on right now? What's releasing next?
Yeah, so we've got 2 films next year that are in the pipeline. We'll be releasing probably February, March. One is a film all around Ireland.
Cool.
It's there are so many Irish Americans in the US, just over, I believe, 40 million. And it's really creating a film that reconnects those Irish Americans and people all over the world who have a little bit of Irish in them into this incredible place. And so we've been making the film for the last 2.5 years. It's an incredible project, fantastic characters. That comes out February, March. We're going to do a big event around St. Patty's Day.
Cool.
Knock on wood that we have some type of vaccine before that. But it is interesting. Like, all of our Canadian theaters are open right now. There's 40 cities across the US that are open at some type of reduced capacity. So, being in California, I always go, really? Is that true? Like, there's actually that many places that are open. But it depends on where you are. And obviously a lot of places that are less dense as far as populations, you got more places opening up. The other film that we're really excited about is we're releasing our film Everest, which is the 25th anniversary of the film of that tragedy in '96, which was documented by John Krakauer's In Thin Air. Incredible story. I just watched the film again. It stands the test of time. An amazing, authentic, gripping story where not only our cameramen were up there documenting the worst tragedy on the mountain ever, but also played a huge part in the rescue. And Beck Weathers, he was left for dead up on the mountain. It was nightfall. He woke up. This is after he climbed it. He had been coming down and he just couldn't go anymore. He woke up, it was a complete pitch black nighttime. Nobody would have ever thought that he'd be able to get back down. And he just started walking. He couldn't see a thing, just started walking, tumbling, made it into Camp 4. Our team was there, was able to bring him farther down. And he had, frostbite all over his hands, frostbite on his face, but he survived. And, in the film, if you haven't seen it, incredible story. But he recounts it and recounts the experience. And so we're re-releasing the film. It's called Everest, the director's cut. And
I see.
We're scanning the film at 16K. We've got the scanner that we've just put in place because it was all shot in IMAX. Like, we were able to take this enormous camera up to the top of the mountain. Nobody had ever done that before. And so it'll look, when we show it digitally, it'll look better than it ever has.
This is what makes you so great, you and your family, is when you start to talk about these stories like you just told, like, your passion really comes out. Like, it's like, you're not just like, oh, I'm pitching my business or I'm selling my business. Like, no, like, it really is authentic with your passion around what you're doing. And you love the storylines and the emotion that triggers for the viewer. I love that about you. And I noticed that on several of the other interviews I watched with you. And I'm sure that's why you guys are so successful. So I really admire the fact that you love what you do. You truly love what you do. And that's so important in our careers, right? You know how many people are driving around going to listen to this episode, hate what they're doing? I feel bad for them. If you're listening, you need to get into something that you love doing, because all you got to do is listen to Shaun, and that's real passion right there. Very good stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm lucky to do what I get to do.
Let me ask you a couple of last minute questions here. I know we're almost out of time. There's two more
Sure.
quick questions. By the way, let me make it three more questions. I wanted to ask you, do all the cameramen work for you, or do you like third party contract extra teams in real quick? I wanted to ask that question.
Yeah. So we have a core group that are all employees, some of them temporary and then become full and then temporary again, all that fun stuff. And then depending on how big the camera team is and what type of shoot we're doing, and we'll go up to like, sometimes like if there are recreations that we're doing from the past, like we'll have like 90 to 100 people out on set. So
wow.
In that circumstance, of course we're hiring a variety of different people that sometimes we've never worked before. But yeah, it's each project's different, and it's I mean each project revolves around its own challenges and opportunities.
Have you thought about doing a documentary on that behind the scenes stuff? Like, okay, here's the 90 guys, and now somebody didn't buy enough food for the tent area, and now we got all this. Where's everybody sleeping? And John's pissed off because he can't sleep with his wife Sally, and she's on the trip with him, and all this little shit that goes on behind the scenes. Have you thought about doing something like that?
I mean, that's what I grew up doing. That's where I like learned how to edit on Final Cut Pro and all that fun stuff. We've never done like a reality kind of TV show around that, or a docu-series around that. But we do for every single one of our films, we have a lot of stories that we put out that are, whether there's 3-minute short form films, up to like a 30-minute documentary on the making of, and those are pretty fun to watch. Like, they are. People love those.
There's several of those on YouTube, by the way. If you guys, for the listeners, if you look those up, those are good. I really enjoy those. Two last questions. If you could call your 21-year-old self going into USC, hold on. Where'd you go to film school? You went to
USC.
Yeah. If you could call your 21-year-old self going into film school at USC, what would you tell him today if you could give him some advice?
Oh man, so much stuff. I mean, first, and I would love to call him up a lot earlier than that. But I'd start with, and I'm one of the things that I'm probably most passionate about is this idea of lifelong learning. This idea that every day you can learn more about a certain subject, you can grow. And so what I tell them, like, what you learn in K through 12 and even what you learn in undergrad, there's so much more that's out there in books and articles, podcasts. I mean, we didn't have podcasts back then, but I'd start with read all of Buffett's annual letters. Start with that. Read that. Read every single one of them. They make it really easy now. They make it easy by you can just buy it on Kindle, and then I go from that to read Charlie Munger's Poor Charlie's Almanac. Read these two things. It'll set you up for life. Obviously, it has nothing to do with filmmaking, but what it does have to do is it will position the way you think about business in a new way. And even if it's business of who you are as a person, knowing you're an employee at a certain company, but you are your own business. And I'd say now more than ever before, especially in this gig economy, and you can speak to this too, obviously, Steve, it's more and more important to be thinking about how you need to grow as a person, because you may not be in a job for the next 40 years if you're 20, 21, 22. Right. And your best opportunity may be sitting around the corner, you just being an entrepreneur. And so I would have loved to have read those books to begin with. I think I got a ton out of SC Film School. So glad I went. I wish I'd taken a little bit more classes around the business side of that, but I learned it the hard knocks way after coming out. Yeah, I think everybody needs to get a TD Ameritrade account. It needs to be thinking about what type of investments they should be making, rather than just giving it to somebody else.
That's good.
I think you can learn a lot by listening to quarterly reports, by hearing what CEOs are saying across various public companies. It's incredible what you can learn.
That's good advice, Shaun. Last question. If you had to, at this stage in your life, at this age, based on everything you know, if you had to put your core purpose in life into a sentence, what would that sound like?
I said it, lifelong learning. Like the idea of growing every day and being able to share education, inspiration to youth, to people of all ages, because I think there's never a plateau. I think like you get out of undergrad, like obviously you're just at the start, and we can always learn more, and there's always something that could potentially make your life a lot better that's already in some book somewhere, and you just haven't read it yet. There's so much more that we can learn. Yeah,
I like that.
And that's what's so cool. I mean, that's what's so cool about Audible now. Like the fact that you can be doing anything, whether it's listening to your podcast, whether it's listening to these fantastic books that are out there. You can be doing it, when you're driving. You can be doing it when you're walking, when you're on a workout. And the same thing when it comes to documentaries. Like you can learn so much in documentaries. My favorite documentaries are the ones that not only are emotional, inspirational, but you learn something from them.
Yes, agreed.
And you become a better person because of it. So that's what I would say.
Good stuff, my friend. Excellent, Shaun.
Cool.
Thank you so much for being on the Riderflex podcast. The Riderflex podcast features entrepreneurs, business executives, and the stories behind how they got there, as well as daily tips on career advice and job interviews. Our show can be heard just about anywhere these days, but you can visit riderflex.com and click on the podcast page to hear all the previous episodes and learn more about the recruiting and consulting services we provide. Contact us at the email address info@riderflex.com or 888-964-5876. Thanks so much for listening, and if you enjoy our show, please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like the episodes.